Hello, welcome everyone to the Royal Drawing School's Creative Conversations. New face on the Creative Conversations. Normally it's Claudia, but tonight my name is Harry Parker. I've been associated with the school for a while. I was on the drawing year about 5 years ago, and at the moment I'm the Director of Education at the school. It's a real pleasure to welcome George Butler tonight to our Creative Conversations. It's week 8, and it's George is struggling with his video, but I'm sure we'll get that. So there he is. Hi, George. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. George, where are you coming from tonight? Where are you based?
I am. I've got an exhibition in the Slabmore Contemporary Gallery, so I've taken over their upstairs office, and they've all gone home, and I've actually shut the shutters and bedding in.
Great. Thanks for coming. So George Butler is a award-winning artist and illustrator who specialises in reportage of conflict zones and current affairs. And we're going to talk a bit about his new book, Drawn Across Borders: True Stories from Migrations today, but also some of his other projects that he's done around COVID and the exhibition. He said he might be able to dash downstairs later and show us the exhibition at the Slabmore. So it'd be great to see that, because I think is it an ecological project that you're working on?
Yeah. It's called Coexistence.
Great. Well, thanks for coming, George. George has work that has been published in the Times, Monocle, New York Times. He's had work in the Guardian, the BBC, CNN. Germany, NLP, the Imperial War Museum, the V&A Museum. So had a lot of work out there, and it was really great to get George along to get a sort of illustrator with a slightly different viewpoint to some of the creative conversations we've had already, because we've had a sort of lots of amazing fine artists on the creative conversations so far. So it's great to have someone who's really sort of at the forefront of illustration and doing something quite interesting with his illustration as well. The reason I really wanted to get George involved was that I'm in Shoreditch at the moment, and we met, what was it, George, 5 years ago, maybe more, maybe 10 years ago, in the studios upstairs. And I think it was Francis Hoyland, one of his One Day One Pose. But I met George in the studios there, and then we've met more recently after George has published this book. So I just thought it'd be really great, George, to get your why you come to the school and why that's so important to your practice.
Well, I mean, my practice is very much based on being able to draw at any given moment, and that fluency and economy of line that we all strive for and never reach. And so the drawing schools were, Royal Drawing Schools, your drawing schools were a place to do that, but also more so than just the kind of parochial life class, which you can find all over the place. I think there are just some great teachers there, aren't there, in the different disciplines, and that's quite hard to find. Even I was on the Kingston illustration course, and there was a couple of brilliant teachers that I sort of clung to, but the sort of thoughts, those old school people like Henry Tonks, or the ones that you were looking to that you imagined that really sort of romantic way that was going to teach you to draw like Degas, don't really exist, except you can find them in different moments in the building that you guys are in. So that for me was great.
So, it's just so great to have you on the conversation. We're going to share some images and slides and talk through your work and the new book, but also some of your influences in a minute. I want to talk through a lot about what you do and how you sort of create these images. So I think I'll share my PowerPoint now. Bear with me, everyone. Here we go. Hopefully you can all see that. So this is George's new book, and it published earlier this year. Was it sort of March? Yeah, and it's go and check it out. It's a really lovely book about migration, and tells the story of the different countries that George has been to. So this is one of the images from the first chapter, which is about Syria, George. And I just wondered if you could before we dive into the work itself, can you just talk us? You talked about the fact that you went to Kingston to do illustration. I just wondered what your path has been from young boy to you're now sort of full-fledged war reporter, reportage. What, you know, in not too much detail, but just to give a flavour, because I think we've got a lot of our students on the line, and what we find at the drawing school is although we have fine artists, there's often a lot of illustrators who apply to our courses and come for the sort of observational drawings. It's an interesting story to tell.
Yeah, so I got onto the Kingston Foundation course, sort of slightly not thinking that I would, but had always drawn. My mum's a kind of artist, and so I've had that around me at home, so that was a kind of reassuring thing. And the foundation courses at Kingston is brilliant, and just sort of opportunity to get heavily involved. But I really didn't know that there was such a thing as illustration, or that it could even be a career of sorts until kind of later in that year. And so all the other bits were equally important: fine art and 3D and fashion. But so I then stayed at Kingston and did the illustration degree, which is another 3 years, and quite a good way into a lot of those degree courses is to do the foundation course, if anyone's thinking of doing that, because you're about 3 months ahead of the timetable, plus the teachers always overlap, so you get a good idea if you're going to get in or not, and harder to say no to you if you're there and being upset. So I got in to do illustration, and then again it was just sort of 3 years. It wasn't until the end that I started. I think it was just, I mean, illustration now is quite a broad school of thought. I guess it could be animation, it could be sort of making puppets, it can be something quite 3D, it could be choreograph, it could be printmaking. But I was always keen on the drawing side of things, but I'd never realized that there was such a thing as reportage until we had a man from the Times come in and set this project about reportage, and I thought this was great, and I kind of set off to try and find the most outrageous thing that I could think of to draw. And so I ended up in this plastic surgeon's theatre where I drew for about 10 days, and the kind of the storyline that I picked that turned into this prize was this little girl called Libby, who had a large melancytic nevus, which is a mole on her, covering part of her eye and her nose, and she had to have about 4 operations to have it removed. So talking about Henry Tonks, these are the sorts of operations that he watched. There had to have a sort of flap of skin taken off her forehead and going down onto her nose, and that, from a kind of anatomical point of view, is an interesting thing to draw. But there was a huge emotional pull with the parents, because it was a cosmetic procedure, so they were trying to decide whether they were being vain in having the procedure done to their 4-year-old daughter, or whether they were whether in fact they should just promote the personality. It was a real kind of conflict, and so my drawings sort of followed that, but also I interviewed them, and it was from that moment on that I realized there's sort of value to illustration, not just taking a photograph, and so since then I guess I've been trying to prove that works.
Yeah, and I really want to talk about this sort of, because obviously in your line of work, going to these sort of slightly dangerous and foreign countries, it's, I suspect there's people with big cameras all over the place and taking pictures of what you're drawing and what it means to take that slow look on the street. But just to carry on with that, so you then ended up in Afghanistan, didn't you?
Yeah.
Sort of led on to this career that you've started.
Yeah, well, you should be talking about this more than me, but especially that part of the world. But so at the end of my degree my uncle was in the army, and I was talking to him about war art and thinking that he wouldn't sort of take the hint, but he said, well, we just better get you out there. And I just thought that was a bad idea, mainly because why would you go? Why would anyone take me? I guess there's a real sort of crisis of confidence. Anyway, I went and spent 3 weeks drawing like these like young men and women that were fighting on the front line. But more significantly, I was drawing in the bases, which kind of cleaning their guns, eating in the canteen, watching TV, waiting to go to war, which we know is 95% of the time. And although I was obviously kind of, as a young man, desperate to do the most scary thing possible, it was actually completely the right decision to keep as a young, quite naive artist back, to draw these moments. And I guess the comparison was that this was a set of drawings that weren't necessarily brilliant, but they were a record of a very kind of a very powerful moment in sort of British Army history, and one that now we're looking back on it becomes more and more significant. And all the headline stuff which is what I wanted to do, is now sort of lost on the internet and not looked at again. So there was a kind of real tussle between what I thought I was supposed to be doing and what I was actually doing, and also my ability, which was really quite limited at the time, to record what I could see. And I think one of the important things about these talks is just to highlight, I should have some of the drawings really, that it wasn't really until the end of my degree show that I really began to kind of work out a formula for drawing and for want of a better word, a style. Before then, it was sort of scratchy and not unfinished and not very attractive. So, but it just takes a huge amount of time, and that's why the life drawing is so important. Just to always go back, like continuing to speak a language, just to keep all those words, that vocab in your mind.
Yeah, and I think we can talk maybe a bit later about that. I think drawing has come back. People draw more. It's more trendy maybe, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're really observing. And I think, that people don't quite get the fact that you really have to look. Yeah. I should probably just mention what George was talking about was that before I sort of got involved with the drawing school, I was in the army, and some of these drawings really resonate with me because I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan. I've seen some of these places, and they really remind me of it. But George, can you talk a bit through this image, and we'll just sort of bounce through some of the drawings now.
Yeah,
I suppose,
I'll keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And I suppose what I like is what you say, and I can some of the sort of, it feels like there's some of the sort of Eastern influences about these voids in the drawings that aren't there, and the way that you sort of compose them. I think they're really interesting drawings, especially because they're quite different to a lot of reportage you see.
Yeah. So to start with, on the kind of technical side of it, this style developed from me being very nervous about two things. One, using color, because I didn't think I was very good at it, so I'd used it as sparingly as possible. And two, doing a drawing that I thought was on the way to being good, and then getting quite nervous and not wanting to finish it. And so to start with, that was the kind of ability side of it. Then I kind of slowly learned that when talking to other people about these, or when looking at work like people like Paul Hogarth, there is great value in leaving white space and negative space, and we do all those exercises in life drawing for the same reason. And it doesn't need to be full to compete with a photograph. In fact, to the opposite is handy. So I kind of concentrated on that and played this good game to try and see how much white space you can leave and still let your eye kind of read across the image. So this is a scene in a little town called Azaz. It was nearly 10 years ago now, but even as I'm talking to you about it, I can sort of feel the hairs on my arm stand up. It's the first scene I came across. So I went to the border thinking this is an opportunity. It was the middle of the Olympics. I'd been kicked out of my flat in East London by a dodgy landlord, wanted to get more rent. And I thought I'd spend the money on a flight to Turkey and then wait on the border for the sort of exodus of refugees that we expected. And when I got there, it wasn't really like that at all. Obviously, the refugees were put into minibuses and taken away to the UN camps, and quite rightly the press were kept out of the way. So I was faced with this decision of following other journalists across the border, or just sort of waiting around in Kilis, this little town, which is quite a classic place. So I had to sort of decide, and one morning I was speaking to some bloke. He was going in, and he went off without me, and I thought, well, I'm not going to wait around here all day. So I got a taxi to the border, and then you show your passport to the Turkish authorities, and they kind of wave you through. And then I walked about 4 kilometers down this empty duty-free lane, empty cars lanes, past an old minefield and into Syria. Met the Free Syrian Army, who are the rebel group at the time, the moderate opposition, as we called them in the West. And they, obviously there was some bloke there who spoke English, and he just said, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? I think it was called Abu Yusuf. We can give you a car. We can give this bloke from the university who speaks English. He'll be your guide. And so off we went. And this was one of the scenes, 2 burnt out tanks, government tanks with kids playing on top of it, and 2 old men coming to inspect their kind of, these the monstrosities left around in their town.
And George, so a lot of the students at the school, we do lots of courses out and about around London, and there's always something quite intimidating. You have to get used to drawing on the street, especially if you're drawing a lively scene or a Shoreditch later.
Yeah.
And I'm just so interested, especially with my experience from being in the army, that you stand there in these places that are potentially quite dangerous for time, and I just wonder what that experience is like. And I remember in the book you talk about this experience of the prison, and I just wondered if you could just talk about how it feels. And because I think for me, when I draw on the street, it takes me a bit of time to sort of switch off from blinker to everything.
Yeah. Well, I actually think it's a great way to learn to draw, because you don't have the option of rubbing out. You have to be brave. You have to kind of keep moving. You've got a perfect excuse for it, but it not looking very good, you can just say, well, I was standing up in the street. And so it kind of, I enjoy it, especially in ink, because it forces my hand to be brave. And then the added pressure of a kind of, being in a funny place also helps. But so this is a scene of a prison in Azaz, the same little town as we've just seen, and I walked in the door with my guide, who didn't speak any English with, and just said, can I draw? And they pulled me up a chair, and I started drawing through the bars of this prison, and in particular this one guy who was staring at me in a very kind of intimidating way, and there was some shouting in the background. The guards were trying to get them to shut up, and it was all quite odd. Everyone's carrying a gun. Anyway, I carry on drawing, and this bloke looks like he's getting crosser and crosser, and certainly in my mind he's getting crosser and crosser. But then at the end, he just sits up and nods to the bloke next to me and says in Arabic, has he finished yet? Can I move? And so all the time he was in fact just posing for this strange white man sitting looking at him. And of course, my complete misconception of the situation. And he got up and sat at the back. And I think just drawing allows that time to learn about the thing that you thought you already knew about. And that's so often the case. Somebody just comes and leans over your shoulder and talks to you. And I think you should just use that as an opportunity. It's the very least you can do to have someone look over your shoulder and be rude about your picture. And in a way, just, take it as if they've come to you and it's friendly, then there's such a great opportunity to sort of use it as a handshake. They never, from there, like so many good things can happen. So that's the way I use it as a tool, really.
And so you've got this amazing quote by A.A. Gill, which is, Butler's memorable images show that a closely observed drawing is not just worth 1,000 words, but 100 photographs. And I just wanted, from your point of view, with this, I don't want to call it a competition, but the sort of photojournalists who are out there, that sort of war reporter, what you feel that the illustrations, and you sort of alluded to it, but the slow look, the fact that you're standing there, and of course nowadays someone can turn their camera around and show them the digital image, but you talked about this handshake, and that feels like a really amazing way to some of these stories that are in your book about the people that you meet.
I mean, it is competition in a sense, because photographers have taken the space of the illustrator in the newspapers and the magazines, probably quite rightly. But
you can't say that. That's
quite rightly, in that it's just sort of so highly, brilliantly, mechanically efficient. But really, they're offering 2 different things, and one is sort of, my part is, I think, as you say, the slow, observed version, and especially in this world where we're so highly sort of interconnected and addicted to our phones, that there is now huge value. And you say that sort of drawing is making a comeback. I just think it's in response to anything that's handmade, man-made, and done kind of openly on a piece of paper or by hand in front of someone. It becomes almost, it's like a sort of children watching a magic trick they haven't seen before, and there is a real power to that. It may not be translatable on the sort of smart gallery wall like downstairs or on the Instagram within the Instagram square, but I guess the part in the book and the point of talking to you about it is that there is huge value in that process, and if the only thing it does allow is time, then that's something that we all struggle to find at the moment.
Yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit about some of your influences, or some of the people, the artists that you've collected over the years, and what just really quickly, sort of to give people a sense of who you have lent on and looked at. What Ronald, so we talked about Tonks already. I'm afraid I haven't got any of his images, but I'm sure people can look them up, especially the ones about the operation. I think that really was very similar to what you were talking about your first.
Apparently Henry Tonks is the way he used to teach was that you had to draw, well, you probably know this better than me, but you had to draw for the first year in just line, and then you would go into his office and see if you're allowed to progress to tone. And then you could do tone for another 6 months, and then eventually you'd be allowed to do color. And this is a savage regimented process. So this is, go on.
So sorry, George, but I think there's a bit of delay, but we'll keep ploughing on. I'll just go through these as you described, sort of how they've been sort of an influence for you. Well,
Ronald Searle was the first person that I kind of learned had done something similar, and these drawings done, the most amazing ones are in the Imperial War Museum, done in 1942 in the prisoner of war camp that he was caught in, and he did 400 drawings of all his prison mates, hid them under his bed in the camp, and all the brilliant things about drawing from life, plus the story, plus the kind of experience. And I once wrote to him before he died, it was probably 15 years ago. Anyway, he wrote back, and I haven't got the quote with me, so I'm going to mangle it. But it was, he basically wrote back saying, "Sorry, I'm too old. I don't really want to talk about this anymore, especially with you. But you look like you're going the right way." And then he says that a pen and a paper is nothing if you've got nothing to say. Otherwise, just do pretty watercolors and forget it. Ronald Searle, like totally illegible. And that sort of stuck in my mind. You've got to have this kind of encyclopedia of what's going on and who your audience is and what you're seeing and what they're going to react to. And it's not good enough just to make it look pretty.
So we've got a bit of Paul Hogarth as well.
And they used to draw a lot together. I mean, he is the master of sort of negative space, and sort of gets one character to look good, and then the rest just sort of scribbles in your mind, kind of tricks you that all the characters look good. But if you look through some of his stuff in America with Graham Greene or anyone, they look brilliant. And he wrote, there's two good books. One's called Creative Pencil Drawing, and one's called Creative Pen Drawing, I think. Creative Ink Drawing. Anyway, they're like real sort of handbooks for getting your stuff together. What pencils do you need to going out? Like, should you take a piece of blotting paper? Just talks you through how he worked. So yeah, a good one to look at.
It's always great understanding how people actually do it. Sometimes it's really fascinating. And then Felix Sapolsky, obviously.
Felix Sapolsky, I thought the reason I liked him is because I thought I had some great insight that nobody else knew about, but I then realized that my teacher had told me to look at him because my teacher thought that my drawings were really uptight. And so Sapolsky just drew in this incredibly fluid way. But the most impressive thing he did, which was printed under the Waterloo arches, was this 12 or 15 year chronicle. And every 2 weeks he printed about 200 copies of a litho set of drawings, and he went around drawing coronations and society events and heads of state, all in this kind of squiggly, whirly line. And the chronicle is in it. I've got a copy of it. It's really amazing, kind of printed on old brown paper. Have you guys got that in your library?
I'm not sure. We'll have to.
Should be sought out.
And obviously his experiences of the war as well. Really
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, fled Poland in 1945 and became British war artist.
And then there's another one of his.
Nice, yeah. And then crossing into print.
Linda Kitson, who I think, in terms of the negative space and the way she writes sort of notes to herself, you can really see that in some of your works as well. Yeah,
I mean, and exciting because she got like the prime access that everybody wants as the only artist, and I think only journalist for a time in the Falklands, because of some her like, I think her family is like big in the army at the time, so she spent time with all these lads as a young woman drawing, and the drawings are, especially on the sort of in the ships and the helicopter one, I can't remember which one it is. It's just amazing kind of fluidity, and I think driven by the sort of ordinariness of it, of her being completely immersed and just having to get on with it. Everyone else has had a much more important job than her, so there's this real kind of relief of pressure. You just have to do what you're there to do.
And then Gerald Squeak, I just put these ones up because everyone knows it so well, but what you said to me that you were more, his, I mean, I just love some of his Vietnam ones. They just remind me of Catch-22 or Man, sort of somehow sort of that absurdity.
Yeah, interesting that one of Churchill looks very much like Boris Johnson now, doesn't it? Yeah. I've been trying to get access to draw in House of Commons for about 5 years now, and I send them this picture about twice a year just to remind them that it has happened before. But yeah, so these ones, I mean, you can see it in you can kind of see how his work developed, and it started as incredibly observational, just trying to get every single thing on the page like we all do, and then slowly got looser and looser, and somewhere in the middle I think is the kind of the Goldilocks moment. But if you look at more of those images, the brilliant Harry blocks out those bits of black. Like without the black, the rest of the drawing doesn't really work. So it's
so I think we'll dive back into your book, and I want to talk a bit about sort of your thoughts on migration and having seen it. And I think this is when is this the Balkans route or back in Europe? Yeah. And I mean, this is, again, you can see that some of your notes, I think, in this on some of the tents, and you can see where you've written. I just wondered about your a little bit about how you do it. Do you try and come up with a finish? Are you collecting as much information as you can and then doing another drawing, or does the drawing you do observationally on site exist all the way through to what ends up in the papers or on the gallery wall?
Yeah, so I work on big loose sheets, not in the sketchbook, because I hate the pressure of a sketchbook, and a loose sheet can disappear. But also there is a kind of commercial value to it. Very difficult to rip your sketchbook up and sell it. So I just have A2 sheets of paper and a board, and work straight on in ink. Sometimes a bit of pencil to get the composition right, which Hogarth used to do. So yeah, and in that sense, I'm collecting. I try and treat it when I'm feeling relaxed as a kind of visual note-taking, just kind of working my way around the page, picking out the bits that are interesting, picking out the characters that stand still long enough, and I guess apart from anything else, you're picking out the bits that you think you can make look good, which is probably a criticism of reportage illustration, but you are obviously always attracted to things that you think you can make look good. So in this scene, that was kind of busy, horrible looking tents, like scratchy things in ink always look good if they're messy, and adding a bit of text. And then probably draw for, I don't know, 40 minutes or an hour. It was freezing cold. This is on the border between Greece and Macedonia. And then colouring it in afterwards, but mostly because it's just another thing to juggle. There's
a lot of drawings that, and in the book you describe the sort of, and I think it feels very distant from us, but there's moments where there's a drawing you make, I think, I haven't got the slide, but it's of just a load of phones charging, and the fact that they're all having to charge their phones, or they're burning clothes to stay warm. And there's one of the...
they're burning the clothes that we all send from Europe as a charity to stay warm. It's a real sort of fuck you to everyone who's trying to help. So, I mean, obviously not like that, but there's sort of tokenism to sending your old clothes out. So this is, I could talk about it for hours. So as I was drawing this, a little boy came and sat next to me, and he had a biro, and he was trying to sort of show that he could also draw. And there was huge kind of social and political pressure because a new fence was being built, which is the one on the front of the book. As a single strand of barbed wire, which was crossing the railway line and not letting anybody in. And then the police were standing there whilst they're erecting this enormous fence that sort of meant that nobody could get anywhere into Europe. And this like extraordinary set of double standards, which is to say, yes, you can seek asylum as long as you get into a country in Europe, but then when they get here, putting up a barrier and saying, actually, that doesn't apply anymore. So there was real anger. Every day there were protests at the fence, at the front of the fence, and someone had been killed on the railway line and got electrocuted. So there was real kind of tension, and it was sad apart from anything else.
And just going back to that idea of how vulnerable you feel, and the idea of the drawing as a sort of handshake or a way into these stories. I mean, in the book you talk about, you're still in touch with some of these people, I think, and lovely moments in the book where you talk about how it's opened up dialogue and conversations.
I mean, the book was really, I realized two things making the book. One is that I was just very briefly in touch with these people at a moment that they were moving in search of a better life, and that they're, in many cases, their stories of migrations are still going on. Some have made it to, there's a guy called Izat who I met a little bit further along, who's in Belgrade. He's was from Afghanistan and eventually got smuggled to Toulouse, and we're in touch on Facebook. A couple of guys I met in Iraq whose parents made it to Germany, but they stayed back at home, Yazidis staying in Kurdistan. These are all people queuing for lunch. Most of the Syrians and Iraqis and Afghans had been let through because they were deemed the most vulnerable, and then you're left behind with people who've left for similar reasons from different places, but because their passports from the wrong place, they have to camp it out in the cold. And the other thing,
seeing people. Sorry, we're so used to seeing people queue at the moment. I think you described in the book about that they were just people were so bored, but also it was just something to do to queue for the food for hours. And this girl you're talking about again about what you pick out, what's the interest, and this girl in the foreground who's smiling amongst all this sort of boredom and that touch of humanity. And I think, I mean, I always think the nice thing about drawing is that you're sort of allowed a way in that isn't the sort of solely the incredibly sad stories that we see on our front page. So the front page news has that the man is electrocuted on the railway line in a miserable camp in Greece and nobody cares, which is true, but also there's a lot of incredibly kind people who want to sit down and chat, and in a way, not to sort of skirt the issue, they reassure you that it's, they take into account what you feel and they reassure you that they are okay. So
it is traumatic to sit and listen to their stories, but also you come away feeling that there is a hope.
And this image from, I think it's Kenya, the bus station. It's sat in the book. You talk about Sammy, who comes up and sort of asks you to take him with you back to the UK.
Yeah, I think that inevitably happens all the time. And there was this young lad who was 14 and obviously incredibly intelligent, listed all the prime ministers of England to prove it, and he wanted to play football in England, and he thought I was the key to that. So we had a long conversation about education and how best to get to England, and could he, if I couldn't take him with me, how is he going to do it? And it's really, I mean, the thing about this book is the kind of great irony and sadness in a way of it, guilt of it, is that I get to leave to a place where they inevitably don't necessarily all want to be, but would like the choice of being able to go and come back. Home is always where they've left from, but the idea of going to Britain, and I'm afraid it is often Britain because of the history of the country. Britain is seen as a place that is a land of kind of promise and reasonable people, and so it's really tough to talk to them about it, or if they've been in touch with our immigration service, then they're usually livid.
Yeah. We're going to talk for probably 10 more minutes, but anyone who's listening, just do chuck a question in the chat box, because we'll do some questions in about 10 minutes. I'm a bit behind time on the slides, so I'm going to race through them a bit.
I'll stop talking.
I just want to talk a bit about Mosul, because Mosul's really in Iraq, which is one of those. It's a really interesting conflict because it was the first time that the International Red Cross couldn't operate there because they didn't feel they could be neutral, and that's a real shift in warfare. Often it was both sides wanted the Red Cross to be there, but because of the way ISIS work, Daesh work, they just couldn't operate there. And I know you were there at a certain time, and I think you, from the last time we spoke, I think you felt like you could be safe. And again, those stories of people who were really kind to you and sort of offered tea even around their sort of destroyed houses. And just this image in particular reminds me of my time in Basra so sort of clearly. Captured the sort of barricaded cars.
It's probably true as well that ISIS really changed the way that the press operated as well, because again, there wasn't the option to be totally neutral. It wasn't good enough any longer just to put a press badge on your helmet and hope that no one would shoot you, because that was the total that was absolutely what ISIS would have done. So I was embedded with a unit for a couple of days with the Golden Division, the Iraqi army. This wasn't with them, but that was the kind of route in. You pick a fixer, fly to Kurdistan, and if you had a press card or something similar, you could get into Mosul, and it was really as simple as that. Quite good to have a reason or a publication to send the stuff to, otherwise it becomes difficult. It becomes difficult when you are on the brink of doing something, either a very good story or following a storyline, or about to sort of take a risk that doesn't just put you at danger, but puts other people that you're with or the people you want to speak to. And so then that's the moment when you have to have a good enough reason to be there and to carry on. And so the book, I mean, I didn't know at the time these drawings were published at the time, but the book has become a kind of reassurance to me that some of the people that I met and the stories that I told are now available. I sort of done what I promised to do at the time.
I love this one, George. It's almost like you could have made it in the Fourth Floor studios here in Charlotte Road.
It does look a bit like that, doesn't it? With John Lassalle wheeling around in the background. This is actually a warehouse behind the train station in Belgrade, and it's been knocked down, but not down now. I think it's been knocked down just so that they don't have to have this picture, not this picture, but other photographs on the front page. But it was full of Bangladeshi, Pakistani migrants waiting on the concrete floor for their smugglers forever to get across along this Balkan route and into Europe. And they were just burning everything, sleepers. They were all getting sick from the smoke in the buildings. It was truly, truly horrific place.
And then back to Syria. So this is Idlib, and people watching might not know that I lost my legs in Afghanistan. So this sort of image of being in hospital, sort of, obviously, it works on me. But there's a story around this image which I think is really powerful, and I'll let you tell it. But the father of the boy had a conversation with you when you were doing it. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, really puts a pressure on to think that you of your experience as well. But I had sort of promised people that I was going to Syria to do some drawings, and then this was the moment where I was sort of thrown through the door of a children's ward and really questioned myself whether I should be there or not. And drawing, like photography, became a great barrier sort of to hide behind. Anyway, I was drawing Ahmed, whose name's different in the book, and I always get it wrong now, but he was called Ahmed in real life, and his dad was called Yassar, and he'd lost his mother, his right leg, and his brother in an airstrike, government airstrike, a few days before. And as I'm drawing, the dad is saying that art can make no difference. And I'm thinking, yeah, you're probably right. And then there's a bloke in the corner whose son had been blown up in the other room, and he luckily spoke English, and he was saying, no, this is exactly, have a very loud conversation as they do in the Middle East, sort of with the whole room involved. No, this is exactly what we should be, you should be seeing and telling the world. This is what's happening to us. This is in the great betrayal of Assad on his people. And so it was kind of every decision that I've ever tried to make combined around the ethics of drawing vulnerable people. And I guess it sort of remains unfinished, and because I was in I didn't want to ruin it, and was in a bit of a rush to get out, and was it acceptable? And so there was this sort of question mark about why and whether it's okay. And I think I came out on the side that by and large, an illustration is quite a gentle way of telling that story.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of red lines, where, I think I don't want to give photojournalism a bad name, it can do amazing things, but sometimes those red lines and what not to draw or observe, or not what to record or report. Are there any instances where you've come to that red line and you decided not to get the sketchbook out, or
I think the red line, I think it's totally the famous red line in photojournalism is the albino Biafran refugee photographed by Don McCullen. And now it's absolutely acceptable to have taken it and recorded it, but at the time very unpopular. In the war, lots of paintings were censored, but I suppose I would draw most things if I thought they were contributed to the story. I remember being led into a hospital in Azaz, that little town in Syria, and walking up the steps, and everybody sitting on the steps outside looking down at their feet, and this very strange atmosphere. And they took me into a room where an old man had just died and was being wrapped up, and they were, as far as they were concerned, I was there to take photographs, and they were saying, take a photograph, come on, come this end, here's his head. And I just couldn't really level with it. I guess I just didn't want to be that person that just draws it's like a sort of channel for embarrassing bodies just for the kind of sake of making something look gruesome. There wasn't an equal sort of proportionate story for doing it. And I think that's very much the kind of line that you have to tread in those parts of the world. You're there as their guest, and the drawings are done by the permission of them. but I had an interesting line drawing in. Sorry, that had an interesting medical red line given to me the other day in the Nightingale Hospital in the Excel Centre, and that was he was a sort of 90-year-old man who was on palliative care, recovering from COVID, and I wanted to draw him this extraordinary, amazing, this extraordinary figure, bird-like figure in his bed, but they wouldn't. He wasn't able to give permission because of the state in which he was in, and so the doctors quite rightly didn't let me draw him. So
I'm just flicking through some of the drawings that
George. Going too slowly.
So no. I just wanted to. I wanted some time for questions as well.
Yeah.
I want to show everyone that George did a project with the army to record some of the scenes and things that have happened during the pandemic. So while you were talking about that, the red line there, I just thought I'd put them up. I think this is the ops room of that you.
So this is an example of a very boring office drawn quite well, but with an extraordinary story. This is the team that basically kept the whole country, all the hospitals in England open because they were the ones providing PPE. So they were buying it in from China one night, delivering it the next day. And this woman, Dr. Emily Lawson, backed up by the army and the Navy and civilians, were making decisions on all of our behalves. And I was standing in the corner watching, and it was amazingly kind of incredibly reassuring to know that there were like real humans solving those problems. So yeah,
I'll just flick through
lads.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to talk too much about these ones, but just because I really want to give some people some time. But it's a great record, and it must have been. I suppose the question to ask, it must have been amazing. You know, often you're abroad. I mean, how did it feel to then come and do sort of reportage in a crisis in your own country, where everyone else was sort of locked in their homes and you were out drawing people?
It was
during our response.
I find it quite difficult being sort of like drawing people that you know. It's always harder because they can sort of see. I don't know. I find it difficult to draw stuff in England, but being out and about, and it was a great excuse, and also sort of felt lucky to be doing it, to be out and about during lockdown, going around. This was in Camden, around the country to some various army bases, drawing the work that they were doing. And that was their testing centre. There's some like chemical warfare lads who are teaching doctors how to put on their masks. That was an army band. They were doing something. They were trying to show the relevance of the British Army by providing the baseline for a young rapper to rap about COVID. Anyway, the rapper was operating on a slightly different time frame, and at 4:00 in the afternoon he wasn't up yet, didn't really want to work, and I was standing around waiting for this kind of great moment of it all to come together. Anyway, so the band were just practicing. Yeah.
And I thought I'd just finish on these two images, just to loop back to migration, because and this drawing, I'll let you tell the story, but these are the things that somebody who was migrating through Lebanon had with them, and it's just amazing that these are things from their kitchen drawer. I'll let you.
Yeah. They are the belongings of two Syrian families that had come across the border from Syria into Lebanon to seek refuge, and I guess the significance of this one was that it was a different way of telling a story, so that was a kind of great formula for me. But they had left at night, and the mum had grabbed the drawer that she knew had the torch in, and the kids had grabbed two of their teddy bears, and when they arrived the next day, they just had all these belongings that they never would need again: the remote control for the TV in Syria, and all those things that we have in those drawers, old batteries, broken lighters. And then they of course kept them because it was all they had from home. So these things became incredibly powerful. The little girl I was drawing, this doll I was drawing at the time, and I was halfway through, and the little girl whose doll it was said, "Have you left one of the legs off? Because she's been caught in the war," and just in a very ordinary way. And that was quite shocking, in that because it was so ordinary, that was the extent of which the kind of war had influenced even this like 3 or 4 year old girl, and her brother had been left behind in Syria to go to school. And
thanks. Sorry, I interrupted.
No,
a bit of a delay.
I'm done.
I'm gonna stop the share there. I really want to sort of quickly talk about your the other projects that you're on at the end. But I just wondered if there's any questions, do write them in the question box. We've got one, so here we go. Got one, and the question is: as an artist living in Switzerland, I asked the ballet corps of Zurich if I could come and draw the ballerinas during rehearsals. I've been drawing at the local ballet school for kids for 6 years. I was told they don't need me. It's great to hear you talk about the value of drawing and why it's better than photographs. What would you say to someone who says that to you?
That they don't need you. How polite you have to be.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So I mean, it's a good. Maybe we could talk about resilience and Knox. I mean, I think a lot of the people watching will be people who are studying at the school now and are connected to the school and artistic. And I think resilience is a really crucial part of being an artist. And I wonder what knocks you've had in your time and how you've dealt with them.
I think constantly people are saying no, because you're trying to sort of push an idea that is always, they say, well, why wouldn't we just take a photograph? But I think you just have to get those. You have to be happy with your product. Like you might be a market seller, like having a product that you have to sell, and then I think you just have to convince them either that they do need you for whatever reason, or just sort of, it's difficult to not know the context, but we do all know, if we don't on this call, then we've done something wrong, that there is value to it, and for all those reasons, and you just have to work out how to demonstrate that. So I think in your own ability, the first best way to do it, but also quite creatively. So I'm always, half my time is spent probably talking and emailing and writing letters and in like nice scratchy pen so that they get to the right people, and persuading them that they do need the drawings, not just because they look good and they're a record and that they can bring them publicity, but also you can provide a bit of film so that you've got content online, that you can animate them, that actually if they want to get in touch with and engage new donors or readers, then I think you just have to build into your portfolio kind of Del Boy-like spiel sales pitch, which has an answer for everything and does take an extraordinarily long time to work out. I haven't cracked it with the Houses of Parliament. They always say no. And even if I'm showing them the picture that Gerald Squeak drew in the house.
You know why they keep saying no?
Originally, because they thought that I was going to, it was sort of at the expenses scandal. Okay. But ultimately, all these excuses are, we don't think you're good enough. So you just have to keep going and keep asking and ask somebody different. And but I also, if the ballet corps think that they don't need you, then maybe there's somewhere else that does. And some people, when I did for my first trip across Africa, I left with a piece of paper that said that I was going to have a picture published every day, every week in the Times Saturday printed. And the editor left before I got to Africa. And the new lady didn't like illustration. she just didn't want to use it. So I was just going around Africa for no reason really, and that was incredibly annoying. But I can answer better questions about professional practice.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer, and I think how people deal with the knocks, and being a professional illustrator is really interesting for people listening. I've got a really sort of a question about how you do it. So do you use a dip pen and bottle of ink, or a brush pen and fiber tip?
Yeah, I use a dip pen and a pot of ink, but also water. I have a pot of water which waters down the ink as I go, so you get a sort of tone. You get a difference in tone, and then I get a difference in weight of line by using different pen nibs, like the Gillette, all those Gillette pen nibs in various different flexibilities. But it takes, don't just go out and buy one of those crappy calligraphy sets with the brass nibs and like dip it in a pot of ink and think it's going to work. It just takes, first of all, they're crap, but second of all, it takes sort of time to get the kind of pressure and all the different parts. I'll show you some of the first drawings I did. They are really bad.
I think I don't want to keep you too long, George, but I'd love to just quickly talk about, as we've had one more question actually that's just coming about how you got access to Syria, and I think you sort of described that about just walking across the border. But I mean, it must be tricky getting access to these places anyway. I mean, I don't know if you want to answer that a bit further, but
yeah, I mean, Syria was a bad example because it was a good example because you just turned up and walked in at right moment, right time. And the second time I had become friends with a little organization called Syria Relief, and we went to the border, and there was this young Syrian lad called Nihad, who I'm still friends with, and he produced on his printer a piece of paper that sort of wangled us through the border. But ordinarily there is a kind of, it doesn't have to be an official route, but I am speaking to lots of different people in the country, in Iraq. I am speaking to the embassy of wherever. I'm speaking to other journalists. There's loads of groups on Facebook full of people, all kind of Iraqi logistics stuff, and sort of build the project like that, and then try and get funding from some places. I talk to all the newspapers before I go, saying I'm going to go, and they always say no, get in touch when you get back. And so there is a bit of a sort of convincing that has to go on, and inevitably along the way you are met with the ballet corps who say no, but you just have to say yes and carry on doing it anyway.
Thanks, George. There's two things I want to quickly talk about before we shut down the call. One is your website, which is really worth checking out, and on it there you've set up a charity, haven't you, which I think is worth checking out too. Can you just quickly describe what you do?
Yeah, you're very nice. You're very nice to talk about it. It's a little charity called Hands Up, and it's I set it up with some friends. It's now run permanently by one of them called Rose, and we just raise money in England for doctors and nurses and teachers in and around Syria, and that's just an incredibly rewarding thing to do when you spend a lot of time on your own drawing.
And the other lot, and also on the website you'll see there's a tab to George's latest project, so George is in the gallery now. Do you want to just sort of talk about quickly, because it's a slightly different project. I think it's really interesting, and I think everyone should get down and see it. Will you describe where it is and what you're up to?
I probably won't run downstairs because I think it probably won't look very good, but I am the kind of support act to this 100 life-size wooden elephants that have been built by an indigenous community in India, and they are here in London in Green Park, 70 of them, to remind us of the space that we need to share on this planet with the other species in order to thrive sort of into the future. So the drawings downstairs are big maps and etchings, and I did the week etching course actually downstairs in your building. It was great. Really got into it. Bit of publicity. So yeah, it's that's my part in it, and the money goes back to conservation projects in Southeast Asia. So quite good, really.
George, thanks so much for taking us through your new book, Drawn Across Borders. And I think everyone, if you've got time, go and check it out. I think most good bookshops.
So, yes, please come to the gallery.
Yeah,
this is an open invite. I'm here whenever, all the time.
Yeah,
I can send that to you, Harry, and you can send it around if you like.
And so yeah, absolutely, yeah, that would be great to check out George's stuff. So thanks so much for joining us, George, and do come back to the school, do some courses. It'd be great to see you in the live room again. And just say to everyone else, we've got Charles Summery Smith next week with Deborah Swallow on the Modern Museum, the future of the art gallery. Charles has got a book out, so it would be really great to hear from them next week at the same time. Thanks everyone for joining us. Keep in contact, spread the word, and you can catch up on this or share the link from the Royal Drawing School website. So have a good evening and speak to you soon.